Today I thought we'd talk a little bit about interrupting patterns. In my work, I see a lot of times people, all of us, get stuck in patterns, certain repeating ways of feeling, ways of acting, ways of thinking. And if we do them long enough or intensely enough, it becomes automatic. Now, when we're dealing with people who want to seek out our help for hypnosis and hypnotic interventions, we want to be aware that even before we do a formal trance, we sometimes have to shake up the trance they're already in. And by that I mean that the trance they're already in is how they see the world. If it's a bad trance, like I'll never get ahead, or no one will ever love me, or let me tell you the latest story of how people manipulate me and I can never have happiness. All of those are really trances. One of my mentors called them the bad trances that people have, how they feel about themselves, about their ability to create change. So we may have to interrupt this pattern of trance before we can even get into a formal trance. Because if they're so wired into thinking one way about a certain situation, it's going to be a little difficult for us to enact change strictly at the unconscious level, although that is possible. So if we can add a little break in the repetitive patterns they're doing consciously, then change at the unconscious level will be a lot easier, at least in my experience. So simple ways to interrupt patterns is just to maybe get them out of a chain of thought. So for example, if you have a client, as I think we've all had, who likes to tell the story, and the story is usually a negative thing that's happened to them, and they begin to define themselves and their worldview by the story, we might need to interrupt that a little bit consciously before we really do a lot of work unconsciously. And let me preface all this as we always want to have a lot of respect, a lot of compassion for the client. We're not just messing with the client, although that, it may seem like that in what I'm saying. We're really not. It's a way to help. It's always with the intention of assisting someone heal. So the first thing is that if someone's telling us this story, we may want to interrupt the story after we've heard it once or twice and ask questions. So if someone's saying, and at that point, that's when he came in and he said I wasn't any good, and then I felt, just betrayed. And, well, right there's a good place to ask. When the person says at that point, go, hold on a second, did you tell me that he was wearing a blue hat? And they'll go, no. You go, oh, I'm sorry, I must be confusing it. Please go ahead. And they'll go back into their story. But what we're doing is even a little break in this chain of reactive nature, this chain of the story. So a little bit later in the story, I never felt I was, worth much because of the way my mom, breastfed me harshly. And did you interrupt? You just say that your mother taught Lithuanian languages or anything like that? No? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. But please continue. Now, I'm being a little silly here, but what we're doing is we're going ahead and interrupting something we've already heard. Okay, this isn't the first time they've come in. See, what happens, we get into these patterns, and as much as we may hate to admit it, a lot of the behaviorists were exactly true, is that when we get into a pattern, those neurons that wire together, Hebb's law, and so we keep repeating those patterns over and over again, and the best way to create change is to interrupt that pattern. And we can do it by interrupting the story to ask questions. And you notice the questions I'm asking are not something that's directly related to tie them back into the story. Asking about somebody's wearing a blue hat when it's actually no context or content involved in the story shifts a little bit of that person's connection just for a little bit. You can see this in daily life when you go to the grocery store. You see the folks who are at the register and they're just scanning things, and they do that and they say the same thing every day. How are you today? Did you find everything you needed? It's almost like this trance, and it may be. I know my best friend William Oliver is a great hypnotist. He likes to go in when they do the "How are you today?" He'll go sober, and what happens is, they don't know what to do. What they're doing now is they're separating from that trance. So for a second, they don't know where to land. What a great time, if he was devious enough, which he is, to do a hypnotic induction. So when we're separating our client from their story for just a little bit, maybe not to that intense a bit, we're giving little breaks in the pattern. And if we just have a little bit of a break in a pattern by how we respond to what they're saying or doing, we can create change in a much easier way when we do a formal trance induction, because we're breaking up the trance they're already in. If you're really playful, you've got a really good client, and you can kind of be playful with them. Notice the next time they do a limiting belief, they tell you a limiting belief about themselves, try laughing like a mad scientist. I'm serious. See what happens. Doc, I don't know if I can ever, do those kind of things. Now, it's a totally different way of responding to them. It shakes up, what they're expecting, because that behavioral pattern, I say this, you do this. I do this, you say this. And, the mad scientist laugh, asking about if, was the person wearing a blue hat? When someone asks how you're doing, saying sober. All of those are creating a little bit of a break in the trance they're already in. And you can do this, again, I'm being silly, but you can do it very compassionately, and that's the way it should be done. But at the same time, don't limit yourself to thinking that you only have to respond a certain way to the client. So if you think about it, just going into trance is a break in the pattern. So if they're very anxious, by giving them a way to not be anxious, you're breaking a pattern in a trance by creating a new trance. So have fun with it. Next time you go to the grocery store, like my friend, and they ask, "Did you find everything okay?" You could ask them, you don't carry emu meat, do you? Because my family sure enjoys emu hamburgers, but it's okay if you don't. And just see what happens. I don't know. Could be fun. Could be interesting. You may even see that for a moment they go into trance. Have fun with this one. I'll see you next time.